It's actually one of the best arguments for why Nostr is gonna succeed, because there's no company, there's no one to go after. That's a big deal. Any, corporation is going to be subject to the laws of that country. Yeah. We've taken the stance that we're going to be as principled on the First Amendment as possible, but we're still a company. And so that's why, for us to achieve any semblance of, true censorship resistance, we have to kind of rely on something like Nostr to achieve that.
I've been really interested in kind of what's happening in Nostr and generally kind of the opportunities around building things in more decentralized publishing and media networks. And I know you guys have been working on Minds with that same aim for like a decade now or so, right? So I just wanted to sort of, get together and hear about sort of what the latest thinking is on kind of what Minds has accomplished so far and what kinds of changes or things you might be thinking about as kind of new technologies like Nostr show up on the scene, and how that sort of evolves your thinking on how to accomplish the goals.
Yeah. So, for us, it's always been an open source first kind of mentality. So that's absolutely crucial. So it's always funny to see, like, whether it's within the Bitcoin or, crypto, or, even Nostr, I've seen certain projects. It's like they build these proprietary apps on top of these open source decentralized protocols. And it's, right. It's very silly. So for us, that's something we've never done. 100% of what we do is built in public and is out there. And we've always just been interested in working on integrating open decentralized protocols as they become available, and mature enough to play around with. So, we're pretty agnostic. We like to see what works. We want to see what works and what can potentially scale. And, Nostr, compared to many of the others that we've tried, has been pretty solid. There's certain frustrations we're having, but it's definitely like accessible, and the developer community is awesome.
Yeah, we tried in the decentralized space a few different prototypes and some hackathons as well that we've done with the ETH community. Mm-hmm. We tried going more of the IPFS route. IPFS has lots of problems. The IPFS website sometimes doesn't even work, so that we had to rule that one out. Right. Even though it looks good on paper and we were kind of excited about it, it just too many issues, and there's firewall issues for people and things like that. And then we played around with Ceramic as well, and that has similar issues because that relies on IPFS. At least it did when we looked at it. They might have re-architected a little bit since then. But so we had the same problem with Ceramic that we had with our own kind of prototype of IPFS. And then they still kind of you require like a MetaMask wallet to like sign into these apps, which, that's kind of where you're supposed to keep your money. You're not supposed to be randomly signing things. There's all sorts of security issues with that. You don't really know what you're authorizing to happen. And then people can just, have access to things that you might not want them to have access to.
So what's important to you when thinking through like a decentralized network, or you're looking at new protocols or technologies? How do you go about evaluating what kind of fits your core beliefs, or what you think is going to help you accomplish what you're trying to do?
So we've got three main pillars that we're trying to accomplish. One is the sovereign identity. So users being in charge of the identity and being able to move that wherever they want, and not have it being owned by the platform that they're using. Okay, so Minds doesn't own your identity, you own your identity. You can use that anywhere you want.
And that's with the identity you created on Minds. You're saying you should be able to use that anywhere?
Yeah, not just on Minds, but just like your whole like web identity. Okay, right? It's something that you own. It's not something that like your Twitter handle, for example. Like Twitter owns that. Right. Yeah. They're just kind of leasing it to you, and they can access it at any time. We're saying that you should own that, and you should be able to sign different types of content, and people can verify that it is actually you. It's almost like your passport, your driver's license, like a digital version of that.
Right. But I assume like when you... sorry, go ahead. You've got three.
No, I was just kind of moving on to the pillars there.
Yeah.
So the next one would be the interoperability, so that people on different apps can communicate with users on different apps as well. And just because you're on a different network or you're in a different application, you can still have your social graphs kind of communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is just portability. So if you don't want to use that app anymore, you're not locked in, and you can move elsewhere if you don't want to, or you can stop using it. So that's kind of what we're focusing on. And we think that solves most of the problems with people being deplatformed or censorship and all the kind of the main reasons that decentralization matters.
Yep. So kind of the identity, the portability, and the data, including graph and post. Is that right?
Yes, that's the interoperability part.
The interoperability. Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually totally on board with all of those and excited about those exact same things. And I think like that's what turned me on to Nostr was that I see the path for how that works now. Like I've been looking for it for a long time and not able to find it. So I wonder, like, if you go back to the beginning of Minds, you guys were in like a very, very different environment, which something like Nostr didn't exist. So when I assume some of these principles were what you were trying to achieve back then. Has that been kind of consistent since the beginning?
Yeah, it just, and there were other options earlier as well. Like Scuttlebutt has been around for a long time. ActivityPub has been around for a long time. But the way that we started building was that I actually met Mark on an ELG forum, ELGG, which is kind of like a very basic social media, open source social media engine, which, we took and forked, and there's still some important little remnants of it, but largely we completely changed it. And so that's what we built on. Like we ripped out my SQL and brought in Cassandra and, built a whole Angular web app and built, React Native mobile apps. And there have actually been multiple iterations of the mobile apps, which you can find in the Git history. Like we were playing with Ionic and what else, Mark? What was the first one in? What was that framework called? That hybrid thing?
You weren't going way back to Appcelerator, were you? Do you remember that one?
No, there was one before.
We had Cordova, which was fun.
Oh, Cordova, right?
Yeah. That's a good one.
So yeah, I mean, like we built and now what we have is an extremely robust kind of cloud native, scalable infrastructure. Our Kubernetes environments are really strong, and then we kind of are integrating with decentralized protocols. So it's like we're unique compared to we're approaching decentralization differently than probably others in the Nostr space, for instance, where they're just building pure clients. And I think that's super important and arguably as if not more important than kind of our approach. But our approach is another approach that is really important because all of Web 2 is built like we're built. And so there needs to be sort of a pathway for Web 2 to kind of learn how to participate in decentralization. And, that's where we really want to help.
Right. So like the architectural things that I think we're all excited about, that we're seeing in Nostr, kind of the identity, interoperability, portability. I think we're all excited about that. But I think like back when you started building Minds, it was a very different world. So how do you imagine that evolves more toward these principles now that we have kind of a mechanism for achieving them? Or do you sort of think there's some parts of it that should remain as they are just because I think you'd mentioned sort of you've invested in a lot of infrastructure already. How do you think about sort of the balance there?
The thing is that the internet's evolved in the way it has because it's the most efficient way of communicating. So having the large centralized networks, it's not necessarily a bad thing because things can be so much quicker. There's so much less bandwidth. And I think even though we're at the stage now where everyone's going, oh, we need to be all running our own queries and everything needs to be done on our local machines, that's not necessarily a problem. And I think we're probably going to move into more of a kind of federated system anyway. And that if you don't like one of the kind of larger centralized points that you're using, then you can run your own, or you can move somewhere else. It's just like, as long as you're not locked in, there's not really too much of a problem, because there's tons of benefits that you get from having things in like a co-located place, like recommendations, search. Yep. I mean, trying to do that like completely without any central points is just like the internet's going to just grind to a halt.
Right. Yeah.
And your bandwidth costs are going to be absolutely insane.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a similarly a kind of a pragmatist or an advocate of pragmatism, I think, in the same way that you're describing. But I think one of the maybe differences, at least from what I'm seeing, or kind of what I'm seeing in Nostr versus what I'm seeing in Minds, is that the Nostr approach starts with everything being kind of these atomic units of messages that just can live on any relay. And so those messages are not controlled by anybody. And then the sort of centralizing forces of like a caching service or a people discovery service or a search service that improve performance or sort of add additional features, those are sort of getting built up within this new kind of bundling up those atomic units of the messages on relays into these other somewhat centralizing forces. But I'd say the benefit of building up those somewhat centralizing forces within kind of the Nostr relay message paradigm means that you don't have to be kind of a control point for the world. And when you sort of route everything through a particular website, then you sort of are a choke point, and you can get sort of takedown requests and kind of content moderation and kind of policy compliance stuff you need to do. So, one of the benefits of building Nostr native is that you sort of, nobody's really responsible for any of that. Like relays can just run whatever they want and people can whack them if they want. But the centralizing stuff kind of comes up as sort of a composition unit of, composing a bunch of those messages. And so I wonder, like, I'd say I'm like similarly a pragmatist about it. Like, I think we do need centralizing points that will help performance improve. But I think somewhat like the idea of adapting the old way to this new way feels like it could be a bit messy. I'm just not even sure how that looks or what you have in mind. So do you sort of take the existing, minds.com website as it is and try to adapt the identities to be Nostr compatible identities, or how does that work?
Right. So this is something that we proposed a NIP that some people are using and that you can use on Minds right now. It's the NIP 26.
Yep.
And this is the delegated signing. So with Minds, every user that's on Minds, we create a default identity for them that we will sign the post on their behalf. Now, you can come along and you can then bring your own Nostr identity. And because we basically make a delegated key that goes in between. And then, so we can still sign posts on your behalf, but you can relinquish that at any point if you don't trust us anymore. So that's kind of how we've got around that.
So let me make sure I understand. So do I go to minds.com, I sign up for a new account, maybe using like an email and password or some kind of traditional Web 2 like mechanisms. And then you create a Nostr public private key pair for me?
Yeah. So you immediately have a Nostr, I guess, identity, but a key pair that we sign your post with that's then available to the Nostr world.
Yeah. And then root key is managed through Minds, right?
Initially, yeah. But if you want to be in control of that and you want it to actually be your identity that we're signing the posts on behalf of, then you create a new key pair based on the delegated signing.
Okay, I think I missed a step here. So I get kind of the Web 2 login creation identity thing, and then what gets created after that?
You can do either. You can either generate
it's
a pair.
An option.
You can generate your own route, which we don't have access to, or you can use your existing. But that'll be correlated to a delegated pair.
And when you say a delegated, are you the delegator, and then the delegatees can be moved outside, or can I actually move the root key?
So it is your root key, and in the way that the Nostr relays reply is that they can verify that the because everything's then has a delegation token. All the events we send has this kind of signed key, and then that relates back to, do they actually have the permission to sign this on my behalf? Okay, so we still sign with our own keys, but we can verify that they are actually from you. This is the query that the relays then do.
Right. So is this doing, like, I can use that root key that gets created with mines for signing messages?
Yeah. So think about it this way. You can basically have a cold, your main Nostr identity can now go into cold storage. You don't even need to run this on mine. So you can put it into cold storage, and you can sign this delegation token to a new like temporary wallet that you have. And then you can, like, if that gets exposed or compromised, you can then cut that off.
Yeah, makes sense. So I get the concept of delegated keys. I think I'm just trying to understand more about how you sort of envision that fitting into the mines world. So do I use mines to create a root key in some cases, or I can import a root key and I can create delegated keys from within mines?
So we can create the root key if you want. That's like an option that the user has, because I mean the UX is, I mean, we're still working on it because it's difficult. Because most users really just I would say, like, most users just want to come to the site and just like use a social network. They don't really care about any of that stuff. So we're just trying to make it easy for them to get their foot into the door and probably not even know about it.
That seems like a great first step.
Yeah, and we want to, help make it easy for our existing users to, generate their own root key, which, we don't have the private key. So that's an option so that we can bring people into the Nostr ecosystem, but also for people who are coming in who are already part of Nostr but sign up for mines, like you, for instance, you could use the key that you already have.
Yep. And can I've read the NIP26 delegated keys on GitHub, but I don't know like how pervasive it is. Like, does it need support from various clients and various relays, or what's sort of the state of the NIP?
The relays don't need to do anything. So that kind of like in quotes, because there's probably some indexing that would need to be done to make it efficient. But the clients would just need to check the delegation token that it actually does exist. And that this is bad, but it's been like 6 months or whatever since we made it. So I've forgotten the full spec of it. But I think inside the event that actually has all the information that you need just to check the signature. So you don't even need to do any additional requests. It's all kind of in the event.
So are there places I could go to create a delegated key? Like, is there some other third-party client I could go to create a delegated key, take that delegated key, and use it to log into mines today?
Bill, do you know if anyone else is? The
fiatjaf sent me a couple of other groups that have built on NIP26. I can follow up with you with them. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but there are a few different apps that are using NIP26.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just curious to kind of play to understand sort of the ways I could take, because I like the idea of NIP26, but I don't know how common it is yet. And I'd like to try to take my existing private key, create a delegated key, and use it to log into mines. I think that'd be like a cool demo experience that shows. Yeah, just that shows kind of how the identity portability works.
Yeah, and we would like to make it so that you could log in or sign up with just a key as opposed to the whole email thing. But, and it would probably be good to talk about spam for a little bit. Mark, can you kind of explain your thoughts?
I mean, spam is one of our biggest issues. We have multiple types of spam on mines. We have the typical SEO spam, people trying to just put links in so that it shows up on other Google search results. Even though we've got all the no followers in, they still think they're getting something out of it. So you'll get all the get rich quick things.
Right.
And then we also have token spam as well. We have our token, people create these token rings, and then it's just inauthentic engagement. So we spend a lot of time trying to minimize spam.
Right.
And one of the best defenses we have that slows them down is actually just making them verify their email address and complete captures. So that's kind of, we can't really get around not having emails for people yet. And so we're trying to figure out the best way that we can let Nostr users in without necessarily having to have a Minds account, how the posts can get in. But we're just kind of trying to figure out the best way that we can verify that this is actually a real human that's going through all our other security checks and validation processes.
And even if they are a real human, I mean, Mark, can you describe what happened when our backend got taken out? So there was an event with this is what I was talking about with why centralized points are sometimes efficient, because there were certain Nostr clients or crawlers that were just kind of like hammering our socket server. Yeah. And then we're doing all these requests and like absolutely enormous payloads of just trying to like crawl all our content. Right. And that's kind of another issue we're trying to figure out, because also we had subscriptions open for each of these requests. And so then they were continuously getting polled as well, even though they were making so many. So there was like tens of thousands of requests for. Right. Now, are you mostly concerned about just like the performance and kind of hits your infrastructure, or do you think the way they're using the data is kind of improper somehow? No, it's more just the hammering of it. Just the fact that they can do that. So we've had to put in some more kind of aggressive rate limits on that, so they can't do that. I mean, I'm sure they had good intentions. They're just trying to make some kind of indexer, but right. But you're running a lot of content. Your backend is kind of a fully centralized service right now, right? Like that's where this problem comes from. So do you think that, like, would you ever consider using kind of the relay idea and sort of separating out where the messages live versus, maybe you just don't even have to deal with that problem if you could run what's effectively your backend as a relay service? So we still need to be able to proxy all the events, because users are just like creating posts, and so we're signing those on the behalf, but they could also change the key pair and rekey at any time. So we would have to basically re-sign the events. And we're talking about, we have hundreds of thousands of new posts every day. So trying to keep two repositories in sync is quite difficult. Right. But I mean, it sounds like some of the problems are coming because you have a lot of structural baggage from a different architecture, and you're somewhat. No, really, most of the problems are coming because we're trying to retrofit WebSockets into a traditional kind of REST API. And I'm not particularly a big fan of the WebSocket approach. One, because I mean, you're limited to. I mean, most browsers have about 10 maximum WebSockets that you can actually have. And they kind of more long-lived than potentially they need to be. And it's harder to do the traditional kind of rate limiting. It's possible to do it, but there's a lot more overhead. Right. That being said, I think we understand why Nostr has gone with the WebSockets approach to be able to achieve, some of the applications that it has. And I think that that's part of the reason that may even be part of the reason it's achieving some of the network effects that it is. So you can do things like chat and whatnot. But yeah, so, I mean, we're staying agnostic, and I really liked your interview with Rabble, on kind of Blue Sky versus Nostr. I thought that was super informative and balanced and well thought out. And, we're looking at them as well. They're not decentralized yet, so it's they haven't released the Federation stuff. But I think that there's definitely good ideas there, and we like the fact that the cathedral versus bazaar model, both are super valid and important. And Nostr is much more truly decentralized, rugged, completely open. And then Blue Sky is it's coming from more of a centralized point, but a lot of the decisions they've made seem to be pretty coherent. So, we'll see. And it's not one ring to rule them all. That's the thing. It's it's easy to get pulled in that direction where it's these warring factions and one has to win, but that's really not what it's going to be like. Oh, tell me more about that. How do you think sort of that future plays out? I don't know if I agree with Bill on this one. I think that one will win, and we'll kill off whichever one is not winning. Well, I mean, one may become bigger than the other, but I don't think that means that one necessarily, like, the other goes away, because
eventually we hopefully get to the point where there's one protocol and that's how we communicate in the decentralized social world. But I think right now it's still very much early stages, very grassroots. So at that point, it doesn't make sense to like back one horse. So, there's lots we can learn from the way Nostr's doing it, lots we can learn from the way Blue Sky's doing it, even like what ActivityPub did. I mean, Blue Sky's taken a lot of inspiration from that. So I think there will become a point, though, kind of like email, where these are the protocols that we're using and this is how you do it. And everything else just kind of morphs into kind of the way.
How do you think about the time frames that's likely to happen over? Like, it's probably much longer than
10 years. Yeah, I think a significant amount of time.
10 years, yeah. It does seem like some of the features of a more universal protocol would be that there's like a person has a first kind of tier one identity type system that's at the protocol level and not somewhere else on the internet. We don't have that really like an email or kind of web protocols. Yeah. Are there other pieces that you think are like really foundational besides that identity thing that would be part of this sort of universal one that you have in mind, Mark?
I think it's just like time is going to tell how they're going to. I see them more morphing into each other.
Right.
Really, I mean, Blue Sky's gone a little bit more of the federated route, with more just emphasis on the identity that you're in control of, and these kind of PDS servers you kind of move around if you don't like it. Which, again, back to my point about centralized services have their benefits, so that's kind of where that comes in. But Nostr's doing a great job with just like ease of getting in there, and you don't even need anyone's permission to start using it. I mean, the only way I could get into Blue Sky was by kind of launching the ATP server myself and going into their like doc files, which has terrible documentation because they obviously don't want you to be doing that.
So you got into Blue Sky without using the waitlist mechanism?
Yeah, I got it running, but there's no federation there. You can't like communicate with another site because they're still working on that.
Oh, I see. So you just have like the server
because I didn't get an invite code, and then as soon as I got that set up, Bill sent me an invite code. But I think that's that's one of the issues with Blue Sky. But one of the benefits with Nostr is that you can just kind of get kicked off.
Right.
The other thing that Nostr really has to figure out is media. And I know I think his name's Stuart. I forget. He's working on the kind of like a Nostr torrent system, but I think Blue Sky is handling images. Is that correct, Mark? Have you checked that out?
Yeah, they have images. I'm not sure how it's going to work at the federation level, because there's nothing really. There's no decentralized part to the app protocol at the moment, or Blue Sky at the moment. It's all just pretty much a bog standard centralized service. So I need to watch the space and see how they're going to be getting around to those issues. They're probably going to be following more of how the ActivityPub was doing it. I'm guessing. I'm not really.
But then we also have the whole Web 5 thing.
Are you guys following that closely?
Well, a little bit. And like Dorsey is just he's a very funny guy, man. I mean, he like, DC's post yesterday about the FBI and CIA and everything.
No. What did it say?
He posts on Twitter, like, shatter the CIA, FBI. It's like, you kind of let them into Twitter. but then he's also like, he has a bet on every horse. He's like, it's like, first he's Twitter, and then he like backs Blue Sky, and then Nostr. And so he's kind of like in all of them, which actually I appreciate. And, he recognizes that there's not a single horse right now, and that like it's a whole kind of spatial push.
Yep.
And but the Web 5 stuff is looking at more web standards and using DID and verifiable credentials and these decentralized web nodes.
Right.
And then Blue Sky is also using DIDs, and we support DIDs, the web spec. And I think that like the TBD organization that is building Web 5 actually started building a Nostr DID integration. But anyway, it's like you kind of have this tension of people who like web standards versus people who hate web standards. And the Nostr community is more so like anti kind of the bureaucracy of web standards. And that's why it works, because it's like, it got launched, it's built. You don't need to go through this whole process. But at the same time, standards do kind of help with interoperability. And, Blue Sky has taken more of like a schema-first approach. Mark, can you kind of talk about why that is appealing in certain ways?
It's appealing because there's not things changing constantly, and it's easy to just know what it's supposed to do, which is one of the main things you really want from a protocol, is how things are supposed to talk to each other. And it's great that there's been so much development interest in Nostr, but I mean it's a slight issue that I think there's over like 40 NIPs right now. It's like, which one am I supposed to use, and then how do I know that someone else who's using Nostr as a client or a relay is actually going to work with what I've got? And I think that Blue Sky's approach to clearly saying that you should have these fields and it should talk to this, and when something's here it should do that, like from the get-go, just makes it easier to develop within the long term, right? It's kind of more future-proof. But there's are going to be downsides to that, which means it's going to be very hard to change things going forwards, because people are going to be more reluctant, because they put all the effort into making it work with the protocol at the initial phase.
I think it's also harder to get buy-in from developers into a system that they can't play with. So like one of the easiest ways to get buy-in is just to be able to like show up and do stuff. And I think that's what we're seeing on Nostr. So I wonder, like, are you guys are obviously like aware of and looking at Blue Sky, but do you sort of consider, building any of the, I don't know, maybe like PDSs or AT protocol stuff into mines, or how do you think about that?
We will be. But until the federation part comes, I mean, it's hard to say whether the schemas and the specs that they've got now are actually going to still remain when the federation component actually comes into play. So there's not much point. It's debatable, really, but we could spend a lot of effort getting it working with like the PDS API, and then it completely change.
Yeah.
So we're kind of seeing what happens.
The other thing, I mean, you're right to call it the AT protocol, not Blue Sky. I want to stop calling it Blue Sky, because I think what's going to happen, assuming that the federation stuff does come out, and Rabble kind of mentioned this, that there's going to be a split in that community, where there's probably going to be like some more rugged decentralization people who kind of start managing like more of a community centric version. Or, I mean, but
by community centric, is that kind of like a grassroots, just like a protocol that anybody can use without really seeking permission from the developers of the protocol?
Yeah. I would imagine that there'll be kind of a different repo that is more like community managed rather than just by the Blue Sky people. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see what happens, actually. It's just, but then, I also totally understand why, fiatjaf chose to just have like the simplest, only one required NIP. I think actually there were conversations to potentially include NIP 26 as a requirement when we were building it. I think it's one of the few NIPs which has even been, kind of given, the chance of being included, just because, the idea that you have to just have this one key that if you lose, you're done is kind of a scary thought for people. Right. But, 100, like there's no comparison right now between, developer community, and there's probably not going to be a comparison for a really long time. Nostr is just, from my experience, Nostr is the healthiest developer community I've almost ever seen. It's just so much fun seeing all the experimentation people are doing. But and it's also funny, like how opinionated fiatjaf is about certain things. Like, he and I really like how kind of no BS he is. Like, right. He'll totally call out like, this is completely stupid. This is not why Nostr was built. This is not what it's for. this is a stupid use case, but like, it doesn't matter what he thinks, and people are going to do it either way. They're going to build chess, or they're going to, build encrypted chat, and some people are going to go on encrypted chat, but it's not, the metadata's exposed. So like, he doesn't even like people doing that, but they do it anyway.
Well, that's okay. The good news is that he, I think he pulled off a little bit of a feat of magic by kind of creating the protocol without being the biggest relay or being the biggest client. He sort of got the ecosystem kickstarted in kind of both of those sides, while not having too heavy a hand in either of them, really.
Oh yeah, I mean that's actually one of the best arguments for why Nostr is gonna succeed, because there's no company, there's no one to go after. That's a big deal.
Yeah,
and he's basically anonymous.
Say more about that. Like, is that as a company, you've sort of been in as a company, and you've sort of seen other companies that have emerged. Have you sort of felt some of that pain from, I don't know, maybe there's like government agencies inquiring on what you're doing or asking you to do things that you maybe don't?
Sure. I mean, any corporation is going to be subject to the laws of that country. Yep. We've taken the stance that we're going to be as principled on the First Amendment as possible, but we're still a company. And so that's why, for us to achieve any semblance of, true censorship resistance, we have to kind of rely on something like Nostr to achieve that. That's a protocol that doesn't, care either way.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that almost seems like the main reason that Minds would have a good fit in this world is that I assume you're US, Delaware domicile, something kind of traditional. Yeah. And so in a world where Nostr enables any relay to run and carry any message, clients can read any message, it would not surprise me if there's some sort of regulatory body that steps in and says, you're not supposed to read from these, you're not supposed to write from those, or kind of a compliance layer, right? And maybe it's for CSAM stuff or other reasons that I think most people would say like, okay, that's reasonable to, right. but like in the Nostr as a genuine protocol that nobody owns, there's no corporation, like nobody really can be responsible for that. So I wonder if part of the opportunity in this world for Minds is to be like a kind of a compliant layer around, like you can run your own Nostr relays, but if you use the Minds experience or the Minds compliance layer, you can operate within certain jurisdictions, and you can be certain that you don't have to take on burden of managing, like various kind of government policies, because Minds kind of handles that for you. Like, is that like an appealing future, or do you sort of?
Yeah, but I think that we're probably going to see something similar to, what's happening with Ethereum and Bitcoin, where you kind of get these OFAC blacklists where, US companies have to kind of abide by these, certain keys have to get blacklisted, which is just, I hope to see more work go into a reputation graph on Nostr. That's really essential for both the spam stuff and also the compliance stuff. So like, and there will be many different graphs, not like a single reputation graph, but I think that's a really important problem that, and not even just for Nostr, but for, App Protocol is going to have to deal with it as well. So I don't know. We've put a lot of thought into decentralized reputation on our end, and you kind of like that's where some of the verifiable credential stuff comes in. But Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's just there's a tension between having the verified and uniqueness with privacy, and we're very privacy conscious, so we don't want to do things that are just completely like invasive or against that principle. But verified credentials work with DIDs, and that's something that we're looking at. But verified credentials have this kind of same problem of lots of talk, but let's actually get down to having something that works. So
why is it that you think we don't, like, the verified credential idea has been talked about a lot, but why do you think we don't have, I don't know of any functioning systems where we can play with it? Or
I'm not sure it's actually finished yet. It's still like in draft spec. I think that maybe it's progressed a little bit further, but it's also DIDs haven't really taken off either. And to have your verified credential, you need a DID. So I think we will get there, but it's a slow process. And I mean, it's almost like the verified credentials. Like, what are you verifying? Like, we can have a verified credential that you have a Minds account and that, you confirmed your email with Minds and you did other kind of checks with Minds, and we can like publish those that other people might find useful. But from our side, from Minds, we want a verified credential that you exist in the US to be able to do certain kind of things, and like you are a US taxpayer for certain financial products that we have and things like that. But we don't want every single user to have to do that just to use the site. It should just be for like certain gates that need to be open. So if you want to make US dollars on Minds, then there's certain regulatory things that are required to do that. And we use Stripe right now, but there's potentially other tools that we could use, but Stripe's not issuing verified credentials, so it's not too useful to.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying Stripe is approaching. They have a whole identity product, but it's very much so not like thinking in the decentralized realm.
Right. Yeah, it seems like if you wanted, DIDs or VCs to take off, you'd need a great use case that a lot of people care about and are using. And any use case outside of communication feels to me like it's low enough kind of, regular, low enough frequency to create really good habits, whereas communication is every day, all day. So it seems like a communication use case that's working would be the first place we'd have the chance to build anything like this and really have it take off. But I guess there's like, questions. Does it happen in Blue Sky? Does it happen in the Nostr ecosystem? Is there another ecosystem?
Verified credentials aren't even too dissimilar to basically what an NFT is. I mean, maybe if they branded verified credentials as NFTs,
well, I think they need I think they need a casino to run them. Like, people need to be able to get rich to be excited about NFTs, right?
Well, there are. I mean, people in the Ethereum space do use, like, there's a whole kind of token gated community use case for NFT. It's probably one of the primary utilities that people talk about for NFTs, which I think is, reasonably valid.
What are the kinds of things that people want to talk about with other people who own the same NFT?
Look at like a sort of like a decentralized Patreon kind of model. It's like, I like a specific creator. If I, want to get access to the exclusive stuff that creator is talking about, and I have one of their NFTs, then I can kind of get into that community. Or if the Boston Red Sox, create a NFT of some baseball card, and then, I can get into a game, or like, it could be anything like that. I think there's a whole ticketing use case. There's a lot of different stuff.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering on the community, like who on a token gated community or kind of an NFT gated community, you'd presumably want to have some shared context that you want to talk about. I think there's been a lot of, utilities proposed for, ticketing, but I don't know if like I go to a concert, I don't know if I want to talk to everybody else in the stadium with me. I'm trying to get a better handle on what the use cases are where these things are kind of most compelling.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it means that you necessarily want to like talk to people. It's just that you want access.
Mm-hmm. It's like access to content. Is that kind of in your mind where this lives? Yeah.
Yeah. Or access to like a space, whether it's a digital space or physical space.
Cool. I wanted to circle back on a comment you made around kind of making money in dollars in Stripe. I wasn't familiar with those features of Minds. Is that something that's currently part of how Minds works?
Yeah, I'll let Bill talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, we have a very robust fiat infrastructure as well. So, we support Bitcoin tipping, Ethereum tokens, but also cash, just because that's people like cash. Cash works. Cash
Mm-hmm.
pays the bills. And so we do aggressive rev shares. So if people serve ads on their page, we split the ad revenue that we make with them, similar to kind of the YouTube model.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gets paid out to you. We have a tool called Supermind where I could send you an offer of like however much to reply to me. And then there's a period of 7 days where you can kind of decide if you want to respond to me, and you only get the money when you respond. And if you don't respond, then I get the money back. So it's kind of this like bounty for a reply, which actually I was talking with fiatjaf, and I think that it would be really cool to figure out a way to do it with the Lightning in Nostr. I think that just like that kind of offer concept for engagement is pretty cool.
And do you think, is that kind of like a fan page influencer use case, or is that more person to person among networks?
It's both. I mean, we've seen people using it like as a commission tool. So like someone will go to an artist on Minds and say, hey, here's $20. Can you draw me a picture of, a dog or whatever? And people will then reply with the photo of the dog. So it's like
a talent marketplace or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like a talent content marketplace.
So do you have like marketplace specific features to help people like get discovered around those, or is it's more kind of the social networking kind of structure, but people just organically figure out? Yeah,
we need to do better at listing kind of people's products and whatnot, and the people who are kind of offering services through it. We're doing it in a primitive way, but I think we could do a lot better. We also do memberships behind a paywall if you want to. And then we have like an affiliate program where if you refer people to Minds who buy things, you get essentially half of the money. So like if you bring someone to Minds and they spend $50 on a boost, you get 45%.
Is that for the lifetime of that user?
That's first month, it's for a year right now. I pushed for longer. Others on the team pushed for, they wanted a threshold. So,
right.
And then like you get 5%. If you bring on a big creator, you get 5%. That is recurring. And so, yeah, like we're trying to get, and the thing that enables this is like, the Stripe API is like serious. Like it really, it works. And it makes it possible to do these kind of programs. It's a lot harder to do with, we would love to do it with Bitcoin, and we need to up our game on Bitcoin. And I think the Zap stuff happening in Nostr is awesome. And hopefully we can be working on that
I'm curious how
in the future
you guys are like maybe the community at large on Minds. How do you think about things like, fiat versus, you mentioned Bitcoin, you mentioned Ethereum, sort of, is there a perspective or sort of agnostic from a platform level or community level? Or?
Yeah, it's pretty agnostic. I mean, we love all of the above. Ethereum has just slightly better developer tools for that kind of creator stuff. But to be honest, the Lightning things, we're just not, we haven't had enough time to kind of dig into Lightning, but I'm definitely super interested in it. And I think that the way that the Zaps have emerged on Nostr is awesome. And I think that we'll look at it when we can.
Have you seen the way Damus has like Zap sharing? Well, it's not quite a share, but it's like a payment. Whenever you pay a creator, you can also contribute a certain percentage to the platform.
Oh, no. How does that work?
So there's a feature that I think it just rolled out maybe a week or two ago, but you can go to your wallet and you can just dial it from like 0% to 100%. And then that means that's the percent of the Zap you're making that will also go to the platform. So I can say, I'm going to send you, 1,000 sats as a creator, and then the platform also gets 1,000 sats from me. So I end up paying.
Oh, so it's like the user chooses the fee that the platform gets.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it puts the control in the user's hands, but it touches on this idea. There's this idea called Lightning Prisms, which this is, I think, not that. This is like a simplified, more kind of proprietary version, but this idea that you could send value to some endpoint, some creator, and then there could be like shares that creator sends part of that out to maybe it's a musician, they send part of it to a producer and part of it to a promoter, part of it to like some studio musicians who are on the tracks with them or something. So it's really interesting, kind of new technological foundation. But of course, like we need the use cases, we need the creators, we need, like there's a lot that needs to happen besides just the core idea, but it can be done at least now, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. So how does the overall business for Minds work today? Is it pretty focused on one of the kind of areas? Like is the subscriptions the big stuff and then these other things are experimental, or sort of do you have a bunch of pillars that all kind of support in different ways?
It's pretty much premium membership. Minds Plus and Minds Pro, is about half of our revenue. And then the Boost advertising, which we don't spy on people. But it is like an open market bidding system. Mm-hmm. Ad network. And then, we take like normal fees on the peer-to-peer stuff, not on the crypto peer-to-peer, but on the fiat peer-to-peer, we take fees.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think about sort of the ad component of what you're doing for the future? Because I think there's a lot of, I don't know if you've seen any of the stuff around like Zapvertising or different ideas within the Nostr community about how ads would work. Is that something you guys have spent
I would love to figure out, like, honestly, the second that we have a minute to, we are raising a community round right now. If anyone's interested at wefunder.com/minds. So we did an equity crowdfunding round, was like one of our first rounds. We want our users to own us. Mm-hmm. That's the goal. So, that's going on. And, once we can kind of breathe a little bit, I would love to figure out a way to help build sort of like a promotion ad network into Nostr. I think that, as a way for clients to monetize better, I think that it's something that is it's a very natural fit. I mean, I know people like there's sort of this, stigma around advertising because of the surveillance economy and like the way that big tech has treated it. But advertising in itself is like totally neutral. It's an ancient thing, actually. Mm-hmm. So, to do it in a privacy centric way is possible, and to help creators promote it, but it's not easy to achieve.
It's not. One of the biggest issues is how do you verify that an ad view did actually happen and it wasn't just some kind of fraudulent client who's just like saying like that he's delivered. Someone comes along and delivered 1 billion views today. Like, okay, right? Did you? You can't prove it. So that's interesting to see how they get around it. It might not be like maybe a view model. Maybe it could be maybe some of the kind of sponsorship thing. I
would guess that there's a lot of innovation to be done in this area. And if you guys already have a functioning ad network, it seems like another area that Minds might be able to uniquely contribute to Nostr, because I think most of the Nostr ecosystem is open source clients. And if you have an open source client that tries to insert an ad directly into a feed, my guess is that'll get forked and have the open source version that doesn't have the ad in the feed. And so everybody will just use whichever clients don't have the ads in the feed, right? So I think that's kind of like...
He's going to develop their own client and put... Unless they're getting paid for it, you're definitely going to be commenting that ad line out, all right?
Right.
So, yeah, but the thing is, like, the way that... Well, they're called boosts on Minds, but like it's actually... Most of the people boosting are like creators trying to get their stuff seen. So it's sometimes some annoying advertisers get in there, but like it's also a discovery mechanism. I find it useful to kind of see who's boosting, and sometimes I've found some cool people that way. But in the context of like getting around the impression fraud and whatnot, I do think that, like, kind of what Mark's saying, like maybe some sort of like sponsor like bidding system where, like, if I want my ad to go to Damas or Coracle or whichever client, then I can kind of bid for a share of the rotation. So it's not like an impression thing. It's kind of like it's just like a ranking system for who's kind of in circulation in the ad flow on that client. So it's kind of like, if you're bidding, you're kind of like in, but like you just, depending on who has the bid, it's just like you have a bigger share of the rotation. And, so if you bid, maybe you're just like always in the rotation. but then you can get pushed down.
Ad auction model.
Yeah, but maybe it's just like a perpetual thing. I don't know.
I think one of the things though with these open source clients is that you're going to have everybody comment out a ad impression line from anything. So I think if you want to do ads, I think ads are a natural part of how some people will want to use this ecosystem, but I think it's probably going to have to take a very different model. So instead of having interruptive ads in a consumption surface, I think there'll be, I call ads like a side quest. You're using whatever client you want, you're doing whatever you want. And then you're like, actually, I want to have some value to boost up some, to pay for a paid relay or to pay for like some content I want to unlock. And then I go do a side quest. I go visit some sort of ad server that has, maybe it's an innovative format. Maybe it's a unique, like a survey where you're sort of more engaged and the advertiser knows what the user what the user's preferences are around that specific set of survey questions, but then you can sort of earn whatever you want to then go spend within the ecosystem. So I think there's like a lot of innovative models to consider here, but I think ads will be part of the future, but I think they're going to end up just looking a lot different. So I wonder if that's like compelling from the way you guys think about ads, or is that kind of not a good fit for where you guys are?
I think that people want to promote and support companies that align with their philosophy. Mm-hmm. So, people are only pissed at ads that are completely irrelevant and annoying to them and like against their philosophy. But what is a social media post but an ad? I mean, it's an ad for an idea, even if it's not like actually promoted in like paid for. Like every time we all post on social media, it's an ad. Yep. So that's the main thing. It's like, if you're on Dama, it's like, yeah, you want to see Bitcoin, you want to see open source stuff, you want to see encryption, you want to see technology. Like that's the type of ads that are relevant to those people. And like what we're seeing and I think that people in the Bitcoin community understand this. It's like, you have to vote with your energy, your time, your money. Like that is how we create the world that we want to create. Like you can't, if you're kind of like anti supporting businesses that align with your philosophy, then you're sort of like opting out of helping change the world in a sense. Now, I'm not saying that like you need to view ads to like help change the world, but like, because certain ads are totally malicious and, you should comment them out. So it's kind of nuanced.
Right. Well, I know we're kind of running towards the end of what we have booked, or maybe we're already past that end, but I wanted to just get a couple final thoughts on we talked about sort of the identity and portability. You mentioned interoperability. And I just wanted to understand, is the idea, I don't know if it's the current state of mind today or where you intended to go, but is the idea that the graph of mine, so any following graph that exists, would have a copy of that relationship, or sort of, within the Nostr ecosystem? Is that kind of like the relationships you intend to be exportable both for like read and write?
Yeah. The write is more difficult because of the spam problem, but we're trying to find ways to get.
Yeah. Anyone who's listening, please reach out with any progress that's been happening in Nostr on spam. I know that Alex Gleason, who created the Nostr activity pub bridge, he opened a merge request with us on what he considered a potential solution, which we're looking at. But anyone who's doing any kind of work in this realm, we would love to hear from you. So, please hit me up.
And is that you're looking for people who are doing those kinds of bridges, or thinking about sort of
like specifically on like how to handle spam and any like reputation graph work, or like, because like right now we are not we're pushing to Nostr, but we're not like pulling in because of the spam issue. We can like implement some kind of like a whitelist, but we just don't really have a graph to like anything to start from, which anyone else is doing with some sort of like a trust graph, so that we can just, not that we would want to stick with that necessarily. We want to grow it as much as possible. But yeah,
one option we've been exploring is people potentially sponsoring a Nostr address to allow it to get in. So there's some kind of like incentive not to spam, and something like just needs to be more difficult for like a spammer to be able to do something, so it's not worth the time.
Is the spam problem that you're talking about, is it mostly from reading from relays and kind of reading a global feed from a relay and getting kind of just too many low quality posts, or is there a different spam problem that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's that. But also, I mean, we want Nostr to be able to interact with our posts as well. We don't want a load of like spam comments that are just circumventing our existing protections that we have, because they don't, it would be so easy to just, if we had no like whitelisting process or anything like that, it'd be so easy to wreak havoc.
Well, because what happens is that, and even with the protections that we have, like our discovery feeds and our trending hashtags and everything, we'll get, occasionally we'll get swamped with spam, even with our current protective measures. So if we decided to ingest like all of Nostr, like our discovery feeds could potentially get completely destroyed. And it would be a nightmare to clean up. So that's why we're kind of being patient with it, but we want to start ingesting as soon as possible.
And that's both the relationships as well as posts. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So
if for anyone, any developers interested in helping, we're at gitlab.com/minds, and we have a number of open Nostr issues on this if you want to join the party.
Great. All right. We'll take that solicitation for more energy and input to figure out how to get Nostr and Minds more kind of collaborating together. So I'm excited. I think we're all excited for the same mission of opening these identities, being portable, being interoperable. So I hope that this insight instigates some interest in collaboration further.
Thanks for having us, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming by.
All right.